Hey guys, welcome back to Heart of the Hero, Tools for Successful Minds. I'm Dan. It's Greg. Go ahead and take it,
Hey,
Greg.
what's up? So today we're talking about information. Information is leverage, how you can use it, and some of the insider tips that you can start to use in your own life to apply information kind of in new ways. And I get that this is a weird thing to talk about. Like I get that this might be something that maybe you've never heard about talked about as a concept, but trust me, if you stick with us, this is going to be one of the most useful. This is going to be one of the most useful demonstrations you've ever watched in your entire life, hands down. And so I promise you now, I guarantee you that if you watch this all the way through, you're going to learn some new ways to grow your brain, to orient
Hmm.
yourself in the world, and more than that, you're gonna learn you're going to learn how and why it's important for you to use information as individual tools to get what you want.
Mm.
So,
It's gonna be interesting. I'm excited. I'm ecstatic.
yeah, he's ecstatic. So I'll kind of lead in here because I like it. I'm an information addict. Actually, in the back, if you see some of the books and the frames and stuff, all that is literally just information I've compiled because I like data and all that garbage. So it's I kind of want to roll in with this idea here. And if you're in the United States, you already know this. But if you're in any industrialized or industrializing post-industrial, I guess, country, right? Modern. What you'll notice is that there's this huge shift, right? That's starting to take place, and it's kind of the world is changing in a lot of ways, to where information is kind of becoming the pinnacle, right? It's kind of becoming the pinnacle of understanding and growth. And it used to be, it was what you could do, right? It used to be what you
Mm.
could do that sort of defined your place in the world, sort of defined your class. But it's not so much that anymore. It's not so much that anymore. We're very, very quickly and very rapidly moving into a world where your ability to acquire information, use information, but not only use it, to understand what it actually means is giving you more opportunities than probably ever seen before in the history of the planet.
Mm.
So I kind of want to talk about some of the ways that might be manifesting, but specifically right now, I want to talk about why it's maybe important for you to get on board with this. So you got any reasons why someone might want to pay attention?
Well, I mean, I think we were kind of born into a gateway or gatekeeper society.
Mm,
Where a lot of the main avenues for success are kind of already covered by these gatekeepers of having to pay huge amounts of money for information. And I think that we're seeing now that since there's so much information, where there's all information is accessible to everyone at any point, even in your smartphone. Like I don't know how
mhm.
much you guys use your iPhone for information, but I settle a lot of arguments that way. Like I do a lot of studying that way. I do study on the fly. I do research on the fly. I learn random facts and words on the fly. There's never a time where I'm not given the information that I want to know, and
Mm.
and so I think kind of with that ability and capability, where information is just accessible infinitely to everyone, where people are starting to kind of see that, okay, well, if I can learn all of this over here online, why do I need all these gatekeeper societies that are kind of blocking the way? Like I have to have this certification to learn how to do this. Now granted, we would all kind of agree we want our heart surgeons certified. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody's letting anybody cut open their brain that doesn't have a plaque on the wall, and or a degree on the wall. And so I understand that there are certain areas where you kind of want that, but there are a lot of areas that are being kind of cracked open to free to whoever really can figure out how to do it. And
Mm.
and there's so many services and so many people have already anticipated this now that there's actually just a ton of services out there to help you get the information that you need, and people who have established blogs and information services and products that will teach you how to get the most out of this, because people have already kind of seen this coming. And now we're at this place where we have these services able to help us get the information that we need, and the information readily available. And so that kind of it just kind of changes the way that the world does business, especially the United States. Not everywhere around the world, anywhere that has high-speed internet is kind of experiencing this trend where anybody can learn anything and become anything and start any business they want because the information is there. And as long as they have the skills necessary and the ability to build a resume and a following, then there's really nothing that they can't do. And that's a new age that we live in.
Yeah, no, and it's kind of shifted everything. It's I really don't like this term, the fact that it's overused, but change the game is the term, because the way that life is lived, right, by the individual is distinctly different now, just because of the fact that the individual, right, and I've talked about this sometimes with people who I know, but the majority of human history was spent by individuals farming or hunting. I mean, most of their time was spent going out and digging to cultivate fields or to hunt an animal, right? That's a huge time sink, right? Now we've moved way past that, absolutely, right? But even post-industrial age, right? Our ability now as individuals, you could a 9-year-old could be reading about quantum physics.
There are 9-year-olds reading about quantum physics.
there's probably 9-year-olds contributing, right? Because all that stuff. With peer-reviewed journals and all this stuff is on the internet, right? You can look up any information you want. You got wikis, you got YouTubes. So it's like there's this. Some people, and if you're listening, you're not one of those people, but some people are really getting left behind this curve of the internet, right? Because it's the thing that people forget and really see this. The thing that people forget is the internet's a baby. I mean, it's very, 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 very young, in the sense of like probably 10 years as far as integration with social media and other people and being able to post things freely, right? And I remember back in maybe you do, Dan, back in the days of MySpace, right? But that kind of stuff, it wasn't as dynamic as things are now, right? So I think one of the big takeaways, and maybe you could chew on this if you're listening, is the fact that you as an individual now have access. You can dip your finger into this huge pool of information and abilities that you can create on the fly, right? And one of the things that I kind of want to talk about, because it's something that I think plagues a lot of individuals. It plagues a lot of people on a deep level, and it's mostly out of habit, but it's the fact that our culture in general is so information rich now. It's so you have access to so many different things, right? The different apps, toolkits, online, downloadable things. How easy is it to get a video? Like Netflix has destroyed, rentals and stuff like that. So the idea that information, right, be it entertainment or education, all this stuff is freely accessible to anyone who wants to get it. Now, sometimes you have to pay a fee, sometimes you don't. But one of the things that I think is worth discussing is the fact that we're kind of tired of it, and I hesitate to put that out there because some people are really they're gonna bite down on that. But what I mean is, there's so much information, there's so much, right? There's so many different ways you can go that it's almost like people have just stopped searching for information altogether, right? You could imagine a situation where, there's a person, right? And they live in a house, maybe they're middle class and, they have family members and all this kind of stuff, right? And maybe it's you, but you as an individual are bombarded with so much information, right? Ads and, people telling you, shares and stuff on your Facebook and all this just information. It's like an information overload. And so what happens is you as a person, you kind of get tired of it and you want to push it aside. You want to go into your own little information systems, and people talk about this a lot. Echo chambers. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that idea because it's not really possible to isolate yourself from all the different viewpoints in the world, but it's possible for you to choose to ignore that information. And a lot of times what's starting to happen now that I've noticed personally, and hopefully if you're watching, you don't have this problem, but if you do, really pay attention. It's people are starting to take information for granted, right? It's almost like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people would probably have killed for the capabilities that we have now, but it's almost like people are stepping back from that because they don't know what to do. So what would you say is are some of the ways that's actually affecting people now, if you thought about it?
Well, I mean, man, it comes with it's kind of this expectation of this instant gratification kind of culture that we live in, where everything's now faster, 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 and everything's is streamlined and done for us and serviced for us and made more convenient. And we kind of live in a convenience era. We kind of live in a convenience age of kind of comfort and getting things fast and now and the easy way. And I think what happens is people kind of assume that one day they'll, just be scouring the internet and have it all figured out. They'll run into some sort of bit of information that's going to solve all their problems. And it's really not going to work that way. Like the more you learn, the more you'll learn that you have to learn. And that takes, effort, and the effort is worth it because the information that you get gives you the tools necessary to make correct decisions, informed decisions that are leading you in the correct path according to your own goals and desires. And with more information, and you'd be amazed at the amount of possibilities that get brought up when you learn things. Like it's almost as if sometimes you have information in your head that's kind of just dead information. It isn't really serving you in any way, right? And then you'll go and you'll take in more information about this. You'll learn more about what you're trying to do, or reading a book or whatever it is, and all of a sudden that kind of like, you now know what this is over here, or it clicks and I could do this, and you didn't even know that was going to be there. So like information kind of pulls information out of your own head, starts relating it to ways that it can be helpful and useful to you. Your brain kind of automatically does this, like, okay, how does this relate to me? And so the more you go through that habit of allowing your brain to relate, yourself to the information that you're learning, and taking in more and more information, especially if it's directed in one specific goal to what you want, then what you're doing is you're painting yourself a mental picture. You're giving yourself a very clear target, a very clear path, because every time you take more information, you're kind of mapping out an area of your life that you're going to have to deal with. Because most likely you're learning that for a reason, because you're going to need that information. And so now you're able to like kind of map that out and give yourself a clear cut view of what that's going to look like. So the more information you get, the more your brain is able to relate it to yourself, the kind of clear picture you get about where you're going and how you're going to do it, and how it's going to be when you get there.
Yeah, and I think the more you grow your information base, and this is kind of what I want to move into next, because it's useful. The more you grow your information base, the more you create options for yourself. But it's more than that. It's a lot more than that. It's almost like the more information you have, the bigger the world gets. And the reason why that is, and I'll run you through an explanation, because I think experience is the best teacher sometimes. Do you remember when you maybe were young, when you were real young? I mean, like 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe some of the listeners don't remember that far back, but if you do, you'll remember that the world was very big, right? The world was very open. All possibilities were available to you because you weren't thinking in terms of like these complex frameworks, right? You were just where you were at. You were having a good time. You were playing with some toys. Your mom or your dad or whoever else was around, they were there, and you were enjoying yourself. But there was nothing really that you didn't think that you could do. Like you kind of, everything was kind of open, right? If you wanted to go stick your finger in the socket, you'd go do it, even though it was pretty sucky. If you would, you'd just do it because you're a kid, right? So it's like the world.
You were taught discipline.
But some of us, right? Some of us were I wasn't. My little brother, though, he would get into everything, right? So maybe you were the kid who liked to explore, and maybe you like to explore now. But one of the things that being young resonates with, right, it parallels, is having more information. And I'll tell you why. What happens is in life, right, there's this point when you're real young, right, when you're real little, and as you grow, right, as you get older, you start to hit this zone right in the middle where you don't know enough, but you don't know that you don't know enough. So you think that you know enough. So what happens is you start, and if you resonate with this, really key in here, because it's something that that it's fairly easy to see if you're in this spot, right? You're tripping over yourself. It's like you think that you know so many things, but your life isn't working. Like you could be, and if you really put some context on that, if you knew the things that you needed to know, your life could work. It would by definition be working if you were doing the things that you needed to do, right? So it's almost like there's this weird disconnect where you think, I know so much stuff. I know this and that, and this is that, and this equals that, and this is real, and no, this is not that. But what happens is you don't have any real world experience. You haven't really fleshed out your ideas. Maybe you're young, maybe you're stupid, maybe you're not. But it's like what happens is in that space, right? You keep running into problems, you keep running into issues, you keep running into frustration because you can't get around it. And so as that moves forward, right, there's sort of a, and maybe it's in your mid 20s, maybe it's in your late 20s, maybe it's in your early 20s if you started early, right? There's a point where you start to realize the information you have isn't that good. It's just not that good. It's not that useful. There's something wrong. There's something missing. And that's when you really get curious. That's when you really your mind starts to open to what's possible in the world and what you could do, right? And this is the point that I want to talk about for you. It's the information phase, right?
You know, and it's almost like information is humbling. Like it's like you think you've got it all mapped out, and then you take more in, and you're just like, oh man, I had no idea what was required of me, you know, and in that sometimes it can be intimidating, but the expectation of how much you'll need to know, like that whole idea that the information that you have is not good. It's one of the difficulties I've seen is, you end up kind of fumbling around to a bunch of different topics and a bunch of different information and a bunch of different, theories and you're not really getting a consistent message. You're not exactly sure what you even need to know. And that is a problem. So, but I think one of those things is solved by continuous information, because even taking in information that isn't necessarily exactly what you need right now, it'll often show you that you'll kind of get this sense and this feel that the information you're taking in is actually not what you need, because you've kind of got the goal, and often you're taking in more information because you're doing something, right? You're like mid steps to actually getting stuff done, and so you're taking in information and you're just like this, and it's good, or maybe it is related to what you're doing, but there's this feel of like, I don't really need this information right now. And sometimes you can stop if you're willing and diligent and flexible enough to just stop and say, this isn't, this is useful. I'm going to shelf this. I'm going to go try to find something else because this isn't exactly what I'm looking for right now, and keep moving, because you'll kind of, so as long as you keep taking in information, and who knows, in a couple months, after a few books later, you could be like, okay, what do I need to know now? And you could be like, oh, hey, that book I shelved, that's exactly what I need now. And you go grab it, and you already have the information right there, and you can start reading, and you've already got a general idea what it is. And so, if you keep taking in information, no matter if it can kind of help with, that knowing what you don't know, or knowing what you need to know, so as long as you keep on taking information, that's a problem that'll kind of solve itself over time. You just have to be willing to put in the work to get the information.
And what are some of the ways, because I could imagine that probably resonates with some people, but if you were listening, if you were talking to someone who was listening right now, what are some of the ways that actually does solve itself? Because you mentioned that, as you take in more information, it sort of opens up more gates, it opens up more doors, it opens up more pathways, new things start to connect, you start to see more about the world and what you can do and all that kind of stuff. But what are some of the ways, like on a down to earth level, like in a person's life, that might, taking in more information might actually start to kind of just reveal new areas of what they can actually do? Could you think of maybe some ways that might manifest itself?
So you're asking if of specifics on how to, find information and how that might look, how that might actually look in someone's life.
Well, it doesn't have to be specific. More if you're listening, right, and you are interested in taking in more information. The question would be, what would you say to someone to explain to them how some of the ways that, you know, learning and growing and taking in more information is actually going to start opening doors for them, like maybe with family, maybe with friends, maybe with, you know, a job, whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And well, okay, well, I mean, I think in my own personal experience, I've seen how, you know, you tend to end up, you know, talking to people that have similar interests to you, right? And so you start learning about, say you're an entrepreneur and you want to start your own business, right? And you actually start, you know, and you start, you know, going through the process of taking in that information and setting those, you know, processes up in your life, getting stuff done, and then taking a what ends up happening is that you present your mind with this information. You present your mind with the conversations, the own internal monologue of like, oh, okay, man, how can I apply that to my own life? And in my experience, you end up finding people who are having these conversations around you that you didn't necessarily hear before. You know, somebody over there is talking about starting their business, and you're like, you have your own business, like. And then they're like, yeah, I've had a business for, you know, 5 years. And you're like, wow, I didn't know. That's really cool. And like, you end up having this conversation with somebody for like an hour about this business and learning all these cool things that they've tried and like able to share information, and they're sharing information back, and you get some valuable tip about like some, you know, site that you use. And it's like, oh, wow, I didn't even know that. Cool. Yeah. That's so much easier. Thanks. And you can learn things just by learning things. I mean, because you'll present yourself with the ear, for your brain. It kind of like searches for more opportunities for you too. When you make the decision to actually do something and you're taking in more information, your brain's already kind of on search mode to how to make those things happen, how to find out how to get things done, you know, making connections. And you'll end up hearing these conversations or seeing people like on Facebook. You happen to notice that it says entrepreneur under there, and it's like, oh wow, they're an entrepreneur too. Message and like hit up a conversation, and you end up learning more about that person. You learned more about their experience, and now you have a connection. And who knows, down the line, you're building all these connections only because you've exposed yourself to information that allows you to actually have a conversation with people on this level. You know, like for instance, my brother, he's a big white collar businessman, and at one point in our life, I couldn't really have a conversation with him about his business. I couldn't really have a conversation with his job because I didn't have the information that he did. You know, I didn't really know how to have a conversation about, you know, Lean Six Sigma and you know, process optimization and all this stuff that he does in his business. And I didn't really know about any of that. I couldn't have that conversation. Well, what ended up happening after I started my independent study was that after I grew my information bank, conversations that weren't up for grabs before were now up for grabs. We would like talk about these new areas of conversation that we had never he would teach me so much just by these conversations as well. And it was like, it would become, you know, it proliferated, you know, it proliferates information. Not all of it was useful to me, but one or two things were, you know, and, you know, and we were able to have this. And now I have another, you know, connections avenue for having this conversation. Somebody who knows a few things that now knows that I'm on that level to have those conversations. So kind of, you know, building information or getting information can present those opportunities to even be on an intellectual level to have those conversations with people, whereas you couldn't before. And when you show that level of capability with certain people, you never know who you could run into that might actually be able to help you or be interested in your business or want to get involved or something. You don't have any idea. You have no clue who you could meet, who's out there doing anything, because you don't actually even have the information to like run into those people and have a conversation. So it's important to have the information so that you can build connections and actually find people that are like-minded and pursuing the same things as you.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, man. and I think if you're hearing this and you're really maybe caught up about the whole business talk, like, we can make a distinction here because it works the same way, right? You could be a skateboarder. You could be doing anything. And the more information you understand about that thing, the better you'll get, the better you'll feel, the more people you'll be able to talk to, the more doors will open, the more possibilities you'll have in your life, the better you'll feel about those possibilities, which gives you more possibilities because you'll go looking for them. It's just, it all comes full circle because information is truly leverage. It's your way of imposing your will on the world through different schemas and frameworks and factoids and pieces of information and phone numbers and whatever else that you have in your head, right? The things that you've learned, you can sort of organize them. It's in a composition, right? It's music. And the way that you spread that, the way that you share that is unique to you, right? I could give you, the listener, I could give you, a person, 500 pieces of information. And I could give someone else the exact same 500. And I put you both in a room and just tell you to write down all the ideas that come to you. You will not have the same ideas. You will not have the same ideas. You might have some of the same ideas, but ultimately your expression of yourself appears through the information that you have, right? So when you limit yourself to, and this moves really well into the next point, when you limit yourself to not growing, right, to constriction, to, not allowing yourself to expand, what happens is you as a person begin to die. And I mean that metaphorically, in the sense of when you're not growing, when you're not expanding, all the people around you, think about all the people around you who are moving. Think about all the people around you who maybe are taking steps, who are taking action, who are growing, who are going to school, who are making money, who are meeting new people. And if you're not doing that, you are falling behind, right? So one of the things that's really, really kind of key to keep in mind is that information it's not just pieces of like, it's not just factoids. It's tools. Each is an individual tool, right? And I think one of the biggest things, and this is why I'm hammering on this so much. I want to crack open your brain, right? I want to take that pickaxe and
not literally
wood. Hopefully not literally. Hopefully you can still use it.
It's okay.
But it's like
we lost the viewer there, Greg. Be careful.
Well, because their mind probably cracked. But it's like it's almost like once you start to see this, you will not want to stop learning. You will not want to stop growing. And I think one of the biggest roadblocks for a lot of people, and I myself included, is this closed-mindedness. It's this, and you don't want to be in this group. It's this closed-minded kind of weird reality thing where you think that you know everything, where you think that I can't learn anything. I don't need to learn anything. The internet can't show me anything. These people don't know what I know, and their information is bum. Or, I mean, you can learn anything from anyone. You don't know. Any door could open, right? Tomorrow you could talk to your grocery clerk and they could offer you a job for $180,000 because their uncle works at a company in New York and you didn't know it, right? Those things could happen. Not saying they're likely, right? But the amount of information that you have, it allows you to plug into different groups. It allows you to plug in with different people. It allows you to plug in with different parts of yourself. And I mean that in the most literal sense, because think about the parts of your own mind. Think about what happens when you go stand in a room by yourself. What happens when you go stand in a room right now by yourself with your phone and your phone dies? It's on airplane mode and there's no other people there. You get all this chatter, you're thinking about how you feel, you're thinking about what you should be doing, you're thinking all this stuff just comes up. And the reason why you can't navigate around that, most people, is because they don't actually know how to do it. They don't have the information. So if you open your mind up, right, if you start to be a little more open-minded with the information that you're choosing to take in, or even better, the information you're choosing to seek out, it really could open some doors for you as a person on an individual level.
Well, and on that, we often talk about these aimed at success. We often talk in the manner where we're kind of aiming to help you get to wherever it is you want to go. And we give you advice and tips that kind of that we feel are things that we've experienced in our own journey, as well as we've learned on, through our own independent studies. And we give this information aimed towards success, but a lot of this sometimes, if you can hear it, is aimed towards you as the listener, individually. What do you need, to succeed? What kind of information do you need about yourself? Because don't undersell the importance of gathering information on how to fix maybe emotional problems or anxiety or depression or any of these things. These are things that kind of put shackles on us and weights on us. They make things more difficult. And so, you know, often we talk about getting information, you think like classes and college and online courses and lectures and all these things, but you know, don't undersell the importance of taking the time to get, you know, learn the information on how to deal with some of the common struggles and issues with your life, because that information is just as priceless. It's just as valuable as any information you're going to learn on how to get somewhere. Because if you can't learn to deal with your emotional baggage or your faulty cognition, which causes anxiety and depression and all this, and if you can't deal with the struggles and wins of life, then it's going to be very difficult for you to take on any other tasks. And I'm not saying that you can't be successful if you have, you know, some anxiety or some depression or you struggle with things, because probably every person, I won't say every, I don't know, but I'm assuming most successful people have like had rough times they've gone through, you know, in one way or another. They've struggled at some point in their career. It was tough. It wasn't always easy going, and they probably even knew the value of information and went out and found, like, you know, got help, talked to a therapist, talked to, you know, learn things about, you know, mindfulness and consciousness and how to, you know, separate from all that, and, you know, setting up a good, rewiring your brain if you're using cognitive behavioral therapy, whatever it is, you know, get information that helps you develop your own self as an efficient functioning person, you know. And because if you can't be that for your goals, then it's just, for one, going to make them much harder, if not completely tie you down, you know.
Are there any ways that you might share? Are there any ways you might share that could maybe illuminate in some people's minds some of the reasons why getting information, like you said, can actually relieve some of that toughness? I mean, because like you said, things can get difficult inside, right? Internally. Are there any ways you could think of, and you know, maybe you said the cognitive behavioral stuff, or you know, mental things, psychology, whatever. Are there any ways that information can sort of free you, can you know, uplift you in a positive way, sort of to move beyond yourself? Because success is useful, right? Success is great, but the real keys are in the mind, right? The tools of success are in the body. They're in who you are. They're in the mind, right? So are there any ways you could think of that maybe information frees people from those chains?
Well, I'd say that there's a lot about the mind that people don't understand. You know, I'd say there's a lot about the subconscious mind that people don't understand.
Yeah.
A lot about just, you know, people in general. And I don't want to generalize too much, because there's a large educated group of the population, right? And I mean, like, you know, by educated, I mean higher educated, like finished college, did college. There's a lot of people that have gone through some of these courses about psychology and sociology and anthropology, and because it was part of their general education. And so, but most people, even them, have a fairly misunderstanding of how the mind works, or just a lack of understanding, and how habits are built, and what conditioning is, and how the way that they even act in the moment is sometimes affected, if not completely, by conditioning and habits, and because your brain, it's a routine machine, right? It's constantly, you know, it's constantly making patterns and recognizing patterns, and so what you can find is if you've set a certain amount of patterns for yourself, habits that the brain have kind of conditioned in there, when you go to make a change and it's hard to deal with emotionally, mentally, or anything like that, causes anxiety, depression, sadness, whatever it triggers, that's a result of you breaking the pattern in your brain. Now, it's because it's kind of a hard stop. You're like, your brain's like, okay, we do this, 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 and wait, we're not doing this. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? I don't know what to do here. I don't know where to go next. And it kind of freaks out a little bit, because it's like, we haven't done this before, and it doesn't have anything to go on. And that's the kind of the importance of like building the habit of taking information that we talked about earlier, is where you kind of build the habit of taking information. Your brain eventually sets up this process of like, hey man, I'm ready to like soak in some information. So if you could like go get some information out there, that'd be great. But so part of what I bring all this up, the conditioning, the conditioned responses that we have, is that when you kind of if you investigate the workings of your own brain, I'm gonna make it really simple. I'm not gonna go too deep on people right now. I'm gonna say this much is that you should go learn how the brain works. You know, you should go learn how the brain affects the body. You should go learn what emotions are physiologically. You should go learn what thoughts are physiologically. You should go study some neuroscience and some psychology and some sociology, because this information, and I've taken a lot of this information, teaches you what is you actually as a person and what is just like everything else around you, because so much of us as people are affected by the environment that we're in, the culture that we are brought up by, the people that we are surrounded with, and honestly, people don't even understand what physiologically is going on when they feel emotions. And so the information that you can get from learning about how your brain works, how a person works, how a person works in relation to society, you will learn a lot about yourself. It will reveal certain patterns to you, and this understanding can help you develop the person that you want to be. This identification of how things work can sometimes put some clarity in your mind. It's not going to do the full job, because I think you need to dive in experientially and do some mindfulness work. But it's one of those things that you have to take a good enough study to know how the actual physiology of the brain works before you can actually dive in. And you can dive in either order, really. You can go into consciousness work first, but I think what's once you kind of go either or, you have to go from the physiology of the brain, the physiology of the body, and then you go into a more experiential consciousness work, which that's kind of where you start to rewrite some of that conditioning, that programming that you have had for your whole life. Everything that you've done, everything that you've or decision you've made, where you lived, who your parents were, that's kind of brought you up, and it's conditioned you to respond a certain way to react to things that are going on in your life. But you don't actually have to respond that way. You don't, even though you get sad doesn't mean depressed, doesn't mean you stop working. Just because you get anxious doesn't mean you stand up and walk around and ignore what you're doing. Just you don't give in to the actual physiological responses that we have. And once you understand what those are, you can kind of identify what's going on. Like when you feel stress and you know that the body is releasing crap loads of chemicals into your body that are making you react this way, you kind of, it's less like, oh my gosh, I'm suffering. And it's more like, wow, my body is just hating me right now. Or like, man, that really, like, I'm feeling this, like, ugh, like I can feel that, adrenaline and oxytocin and serotonin. And actually serotonin is more of the lovey, but you releases these things, and it enforce. And when you recognize that, the information, and you've done then you can start cracking into your own mind as far as, what you deal with emotionally or intellectually. That's a place where you can actually make real change, and you can identify what things are making you suffer. And I feel like that information is very key, and we don't give enough credence to that. That's a very broad stroke on it, because I think both sides need to give, I honestly think we'll end up doing an episode on both, physiology for sure. And consciousness, because that's just kind of too much of a broad stroke. It's really something that we can talk at length for hours, and we have before. And so it's one of those things where this information enriches the ability to create an optimal person that can even go after some of these goals that we want in our lives.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, all of that. And I think it's kind of incumbent on people who know to share this information. And the reason I say that comes from a very deep place in myself, which is, once you reach a certain point in your life, right? Once you reach a certain, I don't want to say pinnacle, but you have a certain amount of information, you don't really have any use for a lot of it. Like, you don't, not personally, right? The purpose of it is for you to then share. And a lot of people, you live in this position, and this may not be you, right? But I know people who are like this, who they don't have enough information to even speak with you in a wise or intelligent way, right? Those people who, when you talk to them, you're listening, you're present, both feet are on the ground, right? Elbows at your sides and your ears are open, but the things that they're saying don't make any damn sense Like they just, you know, those people, like they just say whatever, like, yes, this makes sense. And, you know, like, oh, this and that. The reason is because it comes from a place of them not knowing. They don't actually know. So when you bring them a new perspective, when you say something that they may not have heard, they just automatically disagree with you. They just say, oh, that's not true. That's not right. Or, oh, I got a reason. I got a reason. And so another really key thing that information, the quest for more information allows you to do, it sort of gives you this opportunity, is to engage with those people in a way that actually opens them up. Because when you can take on new perspectives, right? When you can have conversations with people, and what happens for them is their mind is open from the things that you're saying. It allows you to actually connect with them in a deeper and more powerful way, right?
And I think it changes the way you respond to people too. Like when you kind of get to a point in a conversation where somebody's saying disagreeing with you or saying you're wrong in what you're saying, and you don't really have enough information to back it up, you're kind of just done. And you're either assuming they're right or assuming you kind of forgot something that you could have maybe said, and it's like in those conversations, you find yourself, like I found myself where somebody tells me I'm wrong, or that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I kind of, like, well, okay, I've read this book, I've read this, I've done this, I'm doing this, like, and I can list off all the things that I'm doing that would give me the reason to think that I'm right here, because I have information, I have experience. Where are you pulling your information from? And not that sounds cocky, that sounds kind of arrogant into your face, but like people often don't have really any information. They have something that they got off of Facebook, or they watched 1 or 2 YouTube videos on, or they watched the news, or they read some article or some magazine, and they're regurgitating somebody else's opinion at you and passing it off as original. And it's not. It's somebody else's opinion. And so the more information you take in, the more you can kind of see that people don't actually have very good information. Your parents, depending on what you're trying to do, don't necessarily have the best information for you. Okay. My parents have been great. I love them. We're a really tight knit family, but they don't really have anything information wise for my business to tell me. They can't tell me anything. They don't even know any of the things that I know. And so all they can do is be like, we're really proud of you, and that's great. And I love that they support me, but they don't have any good advice. My dad is very intelligent, and he can kind of, help poke holes in areas sometimes in some of my logic. That's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that, and that's mostly just annoying. But like, just to be honest, but it's like, but also even with my my dad, you talking with your family, because family is really important, honestly, especially when you're trying to decide what you want to do. If you're at a place where you're deciding what you want to do, or you have decided what you want to do, or you're doing it, and your parents or family are still kind of being like, well, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure that's safe? That's kind of risky, or whatever they're saying to you. If you have the information and you know what you want to do, the information about yourself, how to keep yourself afloat mentally and emotionally, how to take what steps you have to take to get the thing that you want, what the lifestyle would be like at the end, so that that you want it, the information you need, how well you have to succeed, what ways you have to get yourself out there, that when anybody kind of doubts you, it's just like, okay, do you want to like, do you want to have this conversation? Because like, I'll do this again, like I don't mind, because I have the information you don't. We're going to hit a wall somewhere where you don't know what you're talking about, and it's just not useful for you. And they'll give you like, and people and friends, and I don't mean to be critical here, because friends and family, they most likely give you advice out of love, like out of a place of caring for you and concern, or just making sure that you know what you're talking about. Some of them maybe even want to just hear you say some things to know that you know what you're talking about, so maybe they can rest their mind a little bit. And so it's like, but you have to make sure that you don't take what they say too much to heart, and trust the information that you have, because the information that you've gathered is the information that you need, and the information that you wanted, you needed to get where you need to go.
That was yeah, that was a train right there, buddy. So what are patterns? I mean, because you mentioned patterns a few times, and I kind of have an understanding of them, but for someone who's maybe new and doesn't know what a pattern is, like when you talk about this cognitive stuff, and you say habit and repetition, and like, what is it? What even is a pattern? Because I think there's and this comes with information, right? There's this shift in reality that happens when you start to get more information, and we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. But I think the most fundamental thing that you can change on your own is your own pattern. So is there maybe kind of an easily understandable way that you might be able to explain patterns to someone who doesn't know what they are?
I will answer your question with a story.
Hey, story time. Story time.
No, it's actually, if you haven't heard of, I'm not going to say his other name because I don't know how to pronounce it very well. It's Pavlov. And they talk about this a lot, and this is kind of synonymous with self-development. Is okay. Pavlov had this dog, okay, and he was a psychologist. He's a brilliant psychologist, if you don't know, and you've probably heard the name if you're in college or whatever. So he had this dog, and he noticed that every time the dog like saw or was given a bowl of food, it would salivate. You know, his mouth would start salivating, and he thought that was interesting. He thought that was like, why does he do that? And so he realized that the salivating was a conditioned response that the dog had to the smell of the food. And so what he decided to do was he wondered if he could have other conditioned responses. You know, if you could associate something else and that would trigger the salivating in the dog. So essentially he would give this dog a food and he would ring a bell every single time he gave this dog some food. And he did this twice a day, every day for, I don't exactly, it was months. And he did this every day, rang a bell, gave the dog food, rang the bell, gave the dog food, rang the bell, gave the dog food. And eventually, and actually I'm missing a step there. It was give the dog food, salivate, ring the bell, you know? And so what that did was eventually the dog, its mind, right? The dog has pattern recognition, just like our minds do, except not as complex. And what eventually happened was the dog associated the sound of the bell to, or the sound of the bell to getting fed. So when it would hear the bell, it would trigger the salivating in its mouth. Because it was expecting this pattern. It had built this pattern in its head of the way things go with subconsciously. And again, that's one of the things I said you need to learn about the subconscious mind and the mind in general is because your mind is a pattern recognition. And so essentially, to put that in real terms for you, you go to work for 8 hours a day, right? Say you work 8 hours a day. Hopefully it's just 8. Or hopefully only has to be just 8. You go to work, right? And you spend 8 hours there. You know, you get off 3 o'clock, come home, jump in the shower, you know, cook some food, sit down, watch some TV, right? And you do this every day. This is your routine. This is what you do. Everybody kind of does some kind of form of this when they get off of work. They kind of unwind, you know, and so what I'm trying to get at here is that you do this every day. How long have you been doing this? How long have you worked at the place you work at? How long have you coming home and taking a shower, making food and sitting down and watching TV? I want to point out to you that if you changed up that routine, it would be weird. You would notice physical kind of changes, like you would have stomach pains. Like if you didn't eat, you would have like stomach pains because you'd be like, why am I not getting food? Because your stomach is conditioned. It's recognized this pattern that every time this time of the day after he takes a shower and all these things happen, I get fed. Your legs might cramp up if you don't let yourself relax and sit down for a while because you're like not used to being on your feet after this amount of time. It's a pattern that your brain has recognized. It's a conditioned pattern that you have in there. So that pattern I'm talking about, it's like what patterns could be actually negatively affecting you? What patterns are you know, actually better way to put that is how can you recognize patterns in your life from information? You know, because this is really about information. And I think, again, that comes back to understanding, you know, I can talk about, you know, how patterns are built all day, but until you understand physiologically how the brain works, and because you can take it from me and it's like, oh, sure, my brain doesn't work like that, but it's like, no, these are brains. Like this is anatomy, this is physiology, this is biology, this is how people work. This isn't saying you know, that it's a bad thing, because we're all, you know, the fact that okay, so when I go up to a door and there's a woman coming up, I automatically just grab the door and go in. Why? Like, why? I think it was you, actually. We had a conversation one day that you said that to me. It's like, why do you do that? It's like, because it's a conditioned response. You've just been taught and raised that's the way you should do things. It's chivalrous. Yes, I'm not saying it's not chivalrous and you shouldn't do that. I feel respectful when I do it, but it's like, why do you do that? Because your dad taught you. You know, like you saw your dad do it a bunch of times, and you realize that over and over and over again, you watch this happen and happen and happen. That eventually it's like, oh, men open doors for women. Like, that's the way it is. So that's the way I do it. That's a conditioned response. You don't even think about that when you do it. You just grab the door and let the lady go by. You know, and it's like, so what kind of patterns do you have in your life that are hurting you, that are hindering you, that are constraining you? You know, like that's what I want to point out, is that's why that information is important. Understanding how the brain works, understanding how your mind works, becoming mindfulness, you know, mindful and aware of your own issues and your shortcomings and what things you're good at and who you are. And I think I've said that in another video, but it's okay, because it's, I mean, you're going to hear me say, like I said, there's only so many segments I'm going to pull from here, because there's only so many segments that you need to cover to succeed. There's only so many segments that I have to cover and get you to do. But see, that's not the thing, is that we can give you all the information. We can give you everything that you need to hear, and all the little, like, you know, cool concepts and theories and examples and, you know, analogies. But it takes you actually doing it. You know, this podcast is not enough information for you. I'm just telling you that right now. And I'm sorry if we just lost viewers, but it's like, it's not, it's like we're trying to get you to understand that you don't have enough information, that you need to go out there and get more information, sacrifice some time, build a segment in your day where you actually go out and enrich your mind, find the information the information that you know you need to know, find the stuff that you don't know, and go learn it. None of this information we're giving you matters unless you actually take action upon it and do it, and implement a process of taking in information that's useful to you and getting rid of bad habits, learning how the brain works, learning how your physiology works, so that you can understand some of the responses that you have to stress and emotional turmoil. And yeah.
That's wild, bro. That's wild. No, that is probably the best. I couldn't have given a better example or explanation of patterns. I mean, I was thinking about, you know, when you get your phone, you ever been in public, right? You ever been out at like the mall, maybe, you know, viewers done this, and then like you have your phone and you hear, you know, or like, and you reach for it and it's not there, and it's like, I know, and it's someone else. Well, you know, who's to say that this isn't just something that's hugely social? Because you know, what do phones come with? They come with a stock ring, right? So if you don't change it, it stays on that ring. Well, you go to a mall and you hear 40 people with a ring, you boop, pick it up, right? So it's like these are micro. I mean, you gave the best example of it, honestly. But there's a lot of different micro examples of patterns that you have that you don't even know about, like that you're not even aware of, right? And you mentioned time, Dan. And I want to jump on that. I want to pounce on that. You know, like a lynx. Like one of the things that I hear all the time, or a dog, right? and what I hear all the time about time is that you don't have enough of it. People say, well, yeah, but I don't have enough time to do this thing. I don't have time to whatever, right? So maybe you're thinking, maybe you're the kind of person who's imagining, because it is an imagining, you have enough time. You're imagining that you don't have enough time. You think, you know, I have other things that are more important than this. I have other things that I need to do. I have things that are more important. I want to play The Witcher, whatever. Like this is what you really need to understand. So slow your brain down and shut off.
Slow it down.
And let your roots grow into the dirt for a second, because what you need to understand is your brain, your mind, your own personal functioning, the way you organize yourself as a person, as a human, as an interacting being in the world, the way that you do that is the number one way you can manifest your desires in the world. And I mean that in the most literal sense, meaning you can get what you want, right? Because if you don't orient yourself in the right direction, if you don't move yourself towards the things that you want, if you don't start getting the right information and pouring it into your brain like cement in a bucket, you don't have anywhere you can go. Like, because what are you pulling from? How are you making decisions? How are you choosing things? How are you evaluating between right and wrong? How are your morals set up? How do you know what it is that you want to do? How, even deeper, how do you know that what you want to do is actually what you want to do? How are you checking that? Is there some external source you can use? Is there how do you know that what other people are saying to you is false? How can you even falsify something if you don't have the information to actually back it up? Well, what happens is, and you may have done this as a person, what happens is all you do is you give an opinion. right? You give an opinion. You say, well, I think this, and I think this, and this is why this matters to me, and my opinion's better than yours. And all that you do is you get into this fight with other people, right? It's like a fist fight where all you're doing is you're giving your opinion, they're giving their opinion, they're smashing together, and there's no conversation, there's no growth, there's no advancement, because all you're doing is sharing what you believe is true. And ultimately, you're right. At the end of the day, everything is just a belief, but information is the way that you can back up why you believe those things, right? So if you don't have enough time, cool. If you don't have enough time, that's great for you, right? But if you're a person who wants to be successful, who wants to move forward in the world and actually get as a person, right, and actually get what you want, you need to start making time for this. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be 3 hours a day. It doesn't have to be 5 hours a week. It can be 30 minutes. It can be 5 minutes a day where you just go online and look something up, or you pull out your phone, or you watch a video, or you go.
They got Kindle apps, son. Just download some books. They got Kindle on your phone. You can read instead of being on Facebook. Don't tell me you can't.
There is no can't, right? There's only I won't right now. And I add the right now because eventually the life is going to hit you in the face and you're going to say, I should have done that a long time ago. I should have done that a long time ago. So don't be that person, right? Don't be that person who waits. Don't be that person who has all these reasons, right? Like, I don't have enough time. Yeah, you do. Like yeah, you do. Take inventory, right? Take stock of what you're actually doing. Think about the decisions that you're making, because if you started to make some different ones, if you started to maybe open yourself up to some new information, what would happen is you would very quickly, 3 days, guarantee it, you would start to see some new doors opening up to you, right? That article that you write online, or that thing, that conversation piece. I mean, I say this all the time. I say this all the time, and this is true. There is no such thing as bad information. I say it a lot. I say it a lot. I mean, I'm a walking mannequin saying this thing. It's like there's no bad information. There's no bad questions. And I will argue with people to the death about that, because people believe that there is such thing as, you're asking a bad question, but that's not true. That's just not a good way of looking at it. Because if I ask you a bad question, right? If I ask you a bad question, well, you think that it's actually something that's not useful. But even a bad question can be used in a story to illustrate what a bad question is. You can use information in any way that you want. You just have to start to be more creative in the way that you apply it, right? So the more things that you know, the more information that you have, the more stories that you have about the world, the more you can contrast and compare, because the brain is a comparison machine, right? It's you look at the world through these lenses, and each one is a different set, and it's different, information and different realities and different things that you've decided are true or not based on facts that you know. So once you start to become aware of what those are on your own self based on information, you get more control over your own life. So maybe there's some ways. I mean, we're hammering today, but it's important because this is like key stuff, right? Maybe there's some ways that a person could start to take action on this now. Like if you're, and I know you are, I know you are, because information isn't something that we need to convince anyone about. You live in the age of information. That's literally what it's called. So is there any ways that maybe, Dan, you could think of directing someone to start taking action on this, maybe opening up some new doors for themselves? Some practices, maybe?
Go subscribe to Crash Course YouTube channel.
Ooh, yeah.
Because it doesn't have everything, but like the psychology area, the sociology area, the philosophy area, all those, and anthropology, all those will give you pretty much all you really need to know about people, and also it's got physiology in there, it's got anatomy, you can learn more about the brain too.
Another really good one, School of Life. That's another channel. It's like it's on as well.
Yeah, and these channels are great, but just make sure you actually give the brain due diligence that it deserves, and as far as understanding goes and information goes, because understanding how the brain works. So honestly, start with the brain. Go subscribe to those channels we were talking about, and just take in a little information. Like see what comes up, see what information you think you maybe need next after getting that information. Pay attention to that. See what kind of like, oh, I wonder if I should learn about this. Well, then go check that out too. Just take a step. Just do one thing. Go watch 2 videos. Go watch anything. Just do something to enrich the amount of information that you have today, right now. I mean,
yeah, that's as good as I mean, that's a good a end as any, because I think that we're both in agreement in this way. We're all about taking action. So if you want to ruminate on this, please ruminate on it. Like, do ruminate on it. You know, let it kind of soak around in your brain, flop around, whatever. But ultimately, at the end of the day, take some action. Like, do something, even if it's thinking about doing something. That means you're one step closer to actually pulling the trigger, right? So I think the one thing to remember today is that information is leverage. Information is the way that you access the world, and you open more doors for yourself. And you could think of the world as having levels, right? It has an infinite amount of levels. And when you're born, you start at level 0. You don't have the information. You don't know anything about physics or people, or, you know, what information is, or how to ask questions, or, you know, sex, or how to make money, or you don't know any of these things because you're young, right? And the more that you sort of grow, the more that you expand your mindsets, the more that you learn about the world, the more you open these doors for yourself. So maybe if you're the kind of person who's leaning in that direction, go take some action, and we'll see you soon. We will see you soon.